back with another episode unveiling the mysteries of where common foods come from, so let's get into this. Blackberries have been adapted to grow in all corners of the globe, with examples like the Himalayan blackberry. Since it grows everywhere, it's hard to identify where it came from, but we can narrow it down to North or South America, Europe, or Asia, which is still a very broad area. The Greeks and Romans used blackberries medicinally, Native Americans consumed them as food, used them as medicine, and to dye animal skins. With more than 2,000 species of blackberries, such as the thornless, which is great for backyard growers, the majority of development was done in modern times in America. Wild blackberries haven't changed much in size, but their taste has been improved, along with the creation of other hybrids. A relative to the blackberry, the loganberry, was created by Judge Logan and introduced in 1880. The thornless blackberry was developed in 1921 but lacked flavor. Further cultivation in the form of the triple crown berry has brought the taste back but kept the thorns off. Other creations like the boysenberry we see here is a mixture of a blackberry, loganberry, and a raspberry. I should note these do taste notably different from a blackberry if you've never had one. My personal favorite blackberry hybrid is the tayberry, which is a mix of a blackberry and a raspberry. These are twice as long as a blackberry and have a truly unique taste. Documented in 1696 as being used to make wine and other liquors, the blackberry has been a pie filling since the pioneer days. This berry was thought to ward off bad energy and protect people against spells. Before science was a thing. The brambles, thick with massive thorns, were planted around European villages to offer protection against dangerous wildlife or ones looking to eat their crops, like deer. Today we have new, unreal blackberry varieties like the Tupi floricane Brazilian giant blackberry, which can be as big as an oblong baseball. Originating from the wild mustard plant, or scientifically brassica aloercia, comes not just one of our common foods today, but 6. Early forms of this vegetable were grown in close proximity of several compatible, undomesticated relatives. The domestication process of these vegetables hasn't been fully clarified. The initial location is still up for debate, and its progenitor or founding species. The brassica or aloercia, our best guess where these vegetables came from, is only found on West European Atlantic cliffs in Britain, France, northern Spain, and the German islands of Helgoland and Rügen. It is hypothesized that the first domesticated forms were done so on European Atlantic cliffs and brought to the Mediterranean. In its uncultivated form, the wild mustard, or more commonly called wild cabbage, is a hardy plant with high tolerance for salt and lime that doesn't compete well with others. For this reason, they were pushed to grow near limestone cliffs where other plants don't want to grow, such as the chalk cliffs on both sides of the English Channel and the windswept coast of the Isle of Wight. This tall biennial plant, or one that flowers every 2 years, forms a rosette of large leaves in year 1. These thick, fleshy leaves are much more robust than other brassica species out there, which is an adaptation that allows it to store more water and nutrients in harsh environments they grow. In year 2, they use those stored nutrients to produce a flower spike 3 to 7 feet or 1 to 2 meters tall with many yellow flowers. They're rich in vitamin C and linked to reducing many types of cancers. From the leaves of the brassica aloercia came kale, collard greens, and Chinese broccoli or gailan. Not much is known about this process. Showing up in Greek and Roman texts, we believe these brassica family vegetables had been domesticated long before, but there's no concrete evidence of that. Theophrastus, the successor to Aristotle, mentioned 3 kinds of raphafanos or brassicas: curly-leaved, smooth leaves, or wild type. He expressed his utmost disdain of cabbage and the grapevine, which is in reference to the idea that cabbage was grown near grapevines and imparted the taste of the grapes with cabbage. Domestication increased the size of the leaves, likely creating kale and collard greens first, which are thought to be the source of the other vegetables created, being gailan, cabbage, kohlrabi, cauliflower, broccoli, and Brussels sprouts. After the creation of these vegetables, different varieties of kale have been created, like dinosaur kale, red Russian, and my favorite, thousand-head kale. Collard greens haven't strayed far from their progenitor, but others have been created, like southern favorites like Morris heading collards and Georgia southern with the frilly leaves. Gailan varieties aren't all that different and vary in size and stalk length. Recognized as a domestic vegetable since the 12th century, cabbage comes from the terminal bud. Farmers of ancient times retained large leaves of the newly developed kale and dedicated their energy on reducing the internode length and increasing the terminal bud size. Arising from the shoot are a cluster of immature leaves, which formed the cabbage. A cabbage is essentially an extremely large terminal bud wrapped with tightly packed large leaves on a short, stout stem. White cabbage, red cabbage, and Savoy cabbage are the 3 distinct varieties recognized. Savoy cabbage, you'll notice, has outer leaves that are dimpled, much like the lacinato or dinosaur kale. Coincidence? I think not. Next up, we have kohlrabi. The basal stem of the plant was bred to be enlarged, forming the kohlrabi since the 15th century, as far as we know. Meristem tissue located on the sides of the stem is what allows the stem to grow outwards, making the creation of the kohlrabi possible. The stem was cultivated over the years to enlarge the base of the plant, which at first would have been kale transformed with a bulb, which we call kohlrabi. Within the bulb are parenchyma cells that store nutrients and chemicals synthesized by the plant and also offer structural support. New parenchyma cells originate from the meristem tissue mentioned earlier, which allowed for rapid expansion of the bulb outwards, yet maintaining structural integrity. Over the years, these plants have developed huge bulbs, which you can see here in my past few years of gardening. What's interesting about kohlrabi too is if when young a bite is taken out of it by a worm or bug, the kohlrabi will continue to develop around the bite and seal off the so-called wound. They will still get to full size, just look completely mutant like this specimen I grew 2 years ago. There have been other varieties developed beside the typical purple kohlrabi, like the giant white kohlrabi I grew this year, and a few other varieties of white and purple ones that don't look all that different. Back in the 16th century, according to the earliest records, broccoli was growing in Italy. We don't know if the cauliflower and broccoli were domesticated independently. There are indications that early work shows wider genetic basis for cauliflower, which would imply to us that broccoli was selected from cauliflower. A demonstration by Tongak and Griffiths in 2004 showed that cauliflower was lower in diversity, suggesting broccoli was domesticated first. Cauliflower was likely developed from one of the Italian varieties of broccoli, as they both have exceptionally large inflorescences or flower clusters atop a thick stem. This means you could leave a broccoli or cauliflower head past its ripe state, and those flowers will turn into a bouquet, an ugly bouquet of flowers. This sometimes happens when broccoli is left too long in the fridge. To get these vegetables so dense with flowers, cultivars bred a highly dense inflorescence cluster or meristem. Prolific or almost mutant level amount of inflorescence meristems were developed and packed in so tight that it started to form a head. Now, cauliflower heads are white because they're devoid of chlorophyll. Clever farmers would wrap cauliflower leaves around the head so when they grow, they wouldn't receive any sunlight. This in turn doesn't allow chlorophyll to develop, keeping the head white. The reason for this is chlorophyll will add a bitter taste to them, which is what happens when you expose cauliflower while growing. It'll develop a green head, but it's also bitter. This technique is also used when growing white asparagus, most notably in Europe. Other varieties like Romanesco, purple, and orange cauliflower have been developed, as well as early purple sprouting broccoli, which we can all see the flowers easily, and rapini broccoli. Rapini broccoli, or broccoli rabe, is an Italian broccoli with a small head of broccoli, which is almost likely a middle stage of domestication of broccoli from the new flower buds of the brassica, oleracea origin plant to the full broccoli heads we have today. Brussels sprouts, a weird vegetable, one not like any other, are enlarged auxiliary buds off the main stem of the plant. They're like tightly wrapped tiny cabbages. If you leave them to continue growing past their ripe ready for harvest state, they would develop into short, thick branches. In fact, you can see this if you cut a Brussels sprout in half. The short stem inside is very much like you'd see in a cabbage core. Between the stem and the tightly packed leaves are miniature auxiliary buds. We don't know a lot about the domestication of this veggie either, but we believe it was developed in the 13th century in Belgium. The lime, lemon's green friend, we all know the juice of it on Mexican food, dates back to, well, we don't really know exactly. The precise origin is unknown, but we do know they come from Southeast Asia and Indonesia. The lime comes from the wild lime, or scientifically Citrus hysticrix, or commonly called kaffir lime, which was transported to the Mediterranean region and North Africa by Arabian traders around 1000 CE. In the 12th and 13th centuries, crusaders returning home brought back the kaffir lime to the western Mediterranean, which ended up going with Christopher Columbus to the west. Columbus likely took the seeds, which became widely distributed in the West Indies, Mexico, and Florida. Spanish missionaries tried to grow lime trees in California, but they didn't survive. Citrus, like the wild lime, was an important fruit back in those days to prevent scurvy during the 19th century. British sailors were issued a daily allowance of citrus, like wild lime or citron as we covered in the previous episode. Believe it or not, because scurvy was a widespread problem of the time, citrus was a military secret as it allowed ships and sailors to stay out at sea for extended periods of time, thanks to the fruit. British sailors were given the nickname limey because of their use of limes. After limes made their way to North America, miners and explorers demanded them to prevent scurvy, so they were imported from Tahiti and Mexico during the mid-19th century when stock was low. The wild lime grows on this small thorny evergreen shrub or tree which produces these lumpy, bumpy citrus fruit that are cultivated in Central America, Africa, and the Hawaiian Islands today. Not only are limes edible, but so are the leaves. Kaffir lime leaves are much more popular than the fruit. The leaves taste like lime, which are added to teas and are finally cut up and added to salads, cooked dishes, soups, and curries. The kaffir lime itself has a lemon scent to it with a strong sour taste that is bitter and soap-like. The rough outer skin is ground up and added to Thai dishes or used as a substitute for lemon zest. Since the development of the common lime or the key lime, there have been multiple other limes developed, like the Mexican lime, finger lime, and Persian lime. Before you go, see if you can answer this riddle of a food covered in a previous episode. Remove the outside, cook the inside, eat the outside, throw away the inside. If you want to support my channel, my Patreon is linked in the description. Now why not check out another video like my episode on carnivorous plants, and until the next one, have a good one.